I'm Troy. This is the Art House Radio Podcast. Thank you for joining me. This is the long-promised special alien episode, the long worked on, potentially long awaited episode that I think should or could take you from I want to believe to bitch, I believe. So here's what I want to do. I've got 5 parts, 5 acts to this alien opera, if you will. And I'm going to talk a little bit in between each one or comment about it because I think they're important. Now, I try to break this down into clips that are fair and honest and then talk about them and kind of tell this whole story, this alien story, from the perspective of one person, Commander David Fravor. Now, who is David Fravor? He was a commander in the U.S. Navy, a pilot for 18 years, a high-ranking person who you famously know as the person who saw the Tic Tac craft. And I know you're thinking, oh, Tic Tac, I already know what that's about. Do you? Do you? One thing to keep in mind throughout this episode, Commander David Fravor, 18-year veteran of flying, U.S. Navy, he didn't see this by himself. And he didn't see it and then it was gone, okay? He and his co-pilot, lieutenant commander, and another plane full of 2 trained eyes, that's 4 people in 2 planes, saw this thing for 5 minutes, engaged with it, okay? I don't think it's sinking into everybody yet. Yeah, people say, oh, the Tic Tac craft, yeah, we don't know that, we saw the video. Like, no, listen, I'm telling you, you got to listen to this part of him telling the story, okay? Because I think that gets skipped over when you watch Vice News or CNN or ABC and they just play a little clip and they've got the music of like, or that wasn't intended to be the X-Files thing. I'm just saying, like, they got like the spooky music going, you know, and they're making a mockery of it. That's what they're doing. I don't know what their motivation is for doing that, but that's what they do. So here's the first thing I'm going to do. Part 1 is 14 minutes, and I'm going to tell you how long they are because I don't want there to be any surprises. And this is Commander David Fravor telling the story that I've edited from 35 minutes down to 14 for you. So it's succinct, gripping, and interesting, fascinating, world-changing, potentially. He's talking to Lex Friedman on the Lex Friedman podcast, and I've put together this little clip. So 14 minutes, and I will see you on the other side of it. Remember quickly to support the show if you can. Patreon.com/arthouseradio. It goes a long way. It's an arts podcast trying to make it in this big old world. You know how hard it is to make it in this world. It's even tougher sometimes for artists, but it's tough for everyone. But if you can, please support us. Patreon.com/arthouseradio. Okay.
So here's what I know. So yeah, we went out on our mission to go train, and they canceled the mission. And they sent us down. There's all kinds of rumors out here. There's all kinds of, after this has come out. So originally it was the 4 of us. There's 2 jets, 2 people in each jet. They're F-18Fs. Okay. There is no video from our event. It was all 4 sets of eyeballs staring at this thing. And then when we came back and told it, when Chad and his pilot took off, that's when Chad got the video of it. And we're like, that's it. That's it. And,
so when you say eyeballs, you mean literally your eyes are seeing a thing.
Yeah. So as we're flying out, we get vectored. They come up and tell us, hey, we're going to cancel training. This is a USS Princeton. So this is a Aegis cruiser. So we're talking to one controller who is like, hey, sir, first he asked what ordnance we have on board. And I laugh because we don't carry live ordnance in training typically. They're telling us they have a contact on their radar. They don't know what it is. They just have a blip. They have a little blip. Well, they've been watching these things, and what he told me is they had been looking at these things as we're driving. He says, sir, we've been tracking these things for about 2 weeks. We had been at sea for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He goes, this is the first time we've had planes airborne. We want you to go see what these are.
Gotcha.
So we said,
so they
okay.
kind of interrupt the mission to say, yep, check it out.
That's exactly it. So we start driving out there 20 miles, 15 miles, 10 miles, and then you get to a point where they call merge plot, which means we are inside of the resolution cell of the radar because radars don't see everything. So they have a range and they have an azimuth resolution. Right. So, and it's basically, think of a little cube. So they can, and the whole sky is made of all these little cubes and they're looking. So if you're inside a cube with something and you're both inside the same little cube, then the radar can only see one thing. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So They call merge plot. Well, when we say merge plot to us, it means he's right around, something's around you, get your head out. So we're not looking at radar scopes anymore and the Wizzos can look, but everyone, it's heads out. When they say merge plot, you're done looking at your displays inside, you're doing this and you're trying to find it. So as we look out to the right and you look high and low, because he could be anywhere from the surface all the way up. Now, keep in mind the ship is like probably 60 miles away, so it can't see the surface. And you can do your standard radar horizon calculation and go, hey, it's the thing is 40 feet off the water, the panel. Can he really see? You know, there are radars that can see around the curve, but let's just say that it can't at this time. It's a clear day. There's no clouds and there's no white caps. It's just a calm. It's actually a perfect day. If you owned a sailboat, it was that 5 to 10 knots of wind and you just want to kind of go out there and you're not going to get beat up and have white water come over. It was the perfect day to own a sailboat.
How many miles out do you see? Like 7, like you see just, it's a clear day.
It's 50, it's unrestricted visibility. You can see literally all the way to the horizon. It's just clear.
Wow.
It's nothing. And we're basically off the coast. If you look at a map and you go San Diego and then Ensenada, Mexico, we're kind of in between that. And we're probably about, by the time this all hits, we're probably, I don't know, 80, 100, I don't know, but somewhere out, it's pretty far off the coast.
Perfect visibility.
But from 20,000 feet, you'd be amazed. You can do the calculation. You can see stuff, you know, you'll see land 50 miles away. Mm-hmm. You know, you can see, you know, and when you're looking at a continent, it's really easy to see. You're not looking at an island. I mean, you're looking at Mexico.
And you can see on the white caps in the water if there is any.
Oh, yeah, they're easy. We're pretty conscious of what's going on out there with the waves and the wind. So we look, there's no waves, there's no wind, there's no white caps, and we look down and we see white water. So if you put a piece of land, a seamount below the surface, like, you know, even 20 feet below the surface, it's big enough, as the waves come in, you know, waves have height and length. When they come in, that's what happens on the shore. When a wave comes in, it hits and then it starts to collapse and it pushes the wave height up because it can't go anymore. And then it breaks over the top and you get,
and that's where you get the white.
So what happens is at sea, when you get a seamount, you'll see stuff come in, the wave will crash and you'll get white water. You can go out when it's high tide and any one of the coasts, you can go out here off of Boston and go, hey, at low tide, I can see those rocks. And at high tide, I can't see the rocks are covered, but there will be white water around those rocks. You'll be able to tell there's something underneath the surface. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's what it was. We don't see an object because there's all kinds of, they saw another craft below the wave. We didn't see anything below the water. We just saw white water. But the white water, and I like to shape it, you can say it was across, I say it's about the size of a 737. So it looks like if you took a 737, put it about 15, 20 feet below the water, so the wave's breaking over the top, and you're going to get white water where the plane is at, you'd see this kind of shape. So it looks like a cross. So as we're looking down off the right side, the backseater in the other airplane, Jim, says, this is that talking in partials again. He says, hey, Skipper, do you? And that's about what he gets out of his mouth. And I go, what the hell is that? In a nice.
Do you see that essentially is what he's saying?
So we see the white water, and that's what draws our eyes down there. Otherwise, we'd have never seen it. So we see this
I would have loved
water,
to see the look on your face when you see that. Like,
and then we see this little white Tic Tac because we're about 20,000 feet above it, and it's going basically north, south, and then east, west, north, and it's abrupt. It's very abrupt. So it's not like a helicopter. If a helicopter's going sideways and it's going sideways left and it goes right, what it'll do is it's got a speed, it slows down because there's inertia, and it stops and then it goes back the other way. This thing's not. It's like left, right with no.
So moving in ways that doesn't feel intuitive to you
at all
of the things you've seen in the past.
So as a pilot, the first thing you think is it's a helicopter, right? So you go, oh, what is? Because when we see it's moving, we're like, oh, helicopter. So the first thing you look for to see if it's a helicopter when they're doing that, because usually when they get down there towards that 50 feet, you'll get rotor wash. You see it in the movies when the helicopter's by the water, the water comes up the sides because the downdraft, you know, like a thunderstorm will do that. It pushes the air down and then it has to come out the sides. So you see it and you go, well, there's no rotor wash. What is that thing? So by this time we're driving around. So if we were at the 6 o'clock, we're driving around towards that 9 o'clock position and we're just watching this thing. So now we're like, oh, what the hell is that? So then I go, hey, I'm going to go check it out. And the other pilot says, I'm going to stay up here. And I said, yeah, stay up high. Because now we get a different perspective. Mm-hmm. So she's up here and I'm down here as I'm descending. She can watch, because right now all I'm watching is the Tic Tac. She can watch me and the Tic Tac. So she gets a God's eye view of everything that's going on, which is really important. You know, you'll hear people say it's high cover, whatever. She's watching me. which is it's perfect as the story goes on because it gives us two perspectives, of a perspective that's about 8,000 feet above us when that thing disappears. And they don't, because if it's just like, oh, I lost it. And they go, no, it's over to the right. We can still see it. We all lost it at the same time. So I'm coming down. And as I get to 12 o'clock, as the tic-tac's doing this, it's like it's aware of us and it just goes bloop and it kind of points out towards the west and starts coming up. So now it's obviously knows that we're there. Whatever this thing is, it knows that we're there. So as we drive around, it's coming up and I'm just coming down. I'm just watching it. Now you gotta remember, this whole thing is like 5 minutes. This is not like we saw it and it was gone.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I saw lights in the sky and they were gone. We watched this thing on a crystal clear day with 4 trained observers watch this thing fly around. So we're like, okay. So I get over to the 8 o'clock position and I'm a couple thousand feet above it. And so I'm probably at about 15K, I think it is. I think that's my story is about 15. It's just estimating. So I'm looking at this thing and it's about the 2 o'clock position. We're about the 8 o'clock position. And I'm like, oh, I've got enough altitudes. I'm going to cut across the circle. And I tell the guy in my back seat, dude, I'm going to do this. He's like, go for it, Skip. So I cut across the bottom. So I'm kind of almost coming out co-altitude as this thing's coming out. I'm going to meet it. Mm-hmm. And I'm driving and I get to I'm probably about a half mile away, which you think, well, a half mile is pretty far. A half mile in aviation it's nothing. You can tell there's a pilot in an airplane. You can see all kinds of stuff at a half mile. You can see pretty good detail. So I'm like right there and it's coming across my nose. So now I'm basically pointing back towards the east. So I'm cutting across because I'm going to the 3 o'clock position. It's at 2 o'clock and I'm going to meet it at 3 o'clock. So as I do this, it just accelerates and disappears. So this happens at around estimating about 12,000 feet. So they're at 20. So they've got about 8,000 foot of altitude above us when this happens. And it just, as it crosses our nose, it accelerates in literally in less than, probably less than a half second. It just goes and it's gone. And so we're like, the first thing is, dude, did you guys see it? The other airplane's like, it's gone. We have no idea where it's at. So we kind of spin around real quick. I go, well, let's see what's down here. And I turn around, we're looking for the whitewater. The whitewater's gone. There's nothing. It's literally all blue. So now you go. And I remember telling the guy in my back seat, I go, dude, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty weirded out because this is, I had at the time like 30 some hundred hours of flying. I'd been doing it for 18 years.
It's nothing like anything you've seen.
No. So as we turn, we go, well, let's just go back, because now I got to put on my real hat, which we have to train because we're getting ready to deploy to, overseas. So we got to get our training done. So come back up to train. We go back as we're flying back, the controller, because we're talking to the kid on the Princeton, they're called OSs, they're operations specialists. They're the ones that run the radars. And we're talking to him and he's like, hey, sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap. It showed back up. It just popped up. This is like 60 miles away. It just reappears. We're like, oh, okay. So we got the radars out. We're looking for it. We get out there. We never see it. We never see it again.
So first of all, you mentioned, so you saw at some point XY, and then somebody in the Princeton said, you're not going to believe this, sir. It's at your cap point. Now, that's a different place. How the heck did it know what your cap point is?
That's a good question. And that's the one, if you don't, no one, we don't tell it, we don't broadcast it. We have a waypoint in the system. But I don't know, maybe it knew where we were going because we use the same one day after day after day.
Right, just use it.
But it obviously knew.
But you never saw it there.
Never saw it there. Chad, when he took off, when he got the video, we landed. We told them, "Hey, look, we just chased this thing." They're like, "What?" I go, "Chased it." And they're like, "What?" I go, "Dude," and I go, and I told him, I said, "Dude, get video." And he goes, he was determined that he was going to find this thing. So when you look at his video, and this is the stuff that isn't out that they don't see because not all all you see is the FLIR tape. That's the targeting pod, the forward-looking infrared receiver. So he goes out, and when he first sees it, he gets a radar return on it because when he's not trying to lock it, so the radar's just throwing energy out and getting it. It's a Doppler radar. So when it's in search mode, that's all it's doing. It's going, oh, I can see you. I can see you. And it's looking for a return. So he gets a return. So he wants to see what it is because all you get is a little green square unless it builds a track file on it. Well, the little green square is just sitting there. It's not moving because it's sitting in one spot in space. He locks it up. When he goes to lock it up, now he's putting a bunch of energy on it. Yeah. So he's telling the radar, stare down that line of sight, and whatever's there, I want you to grab it and build a track file on it, which will tell us how high it is, how fast it is, and the direction that it's going. Okay? The radar's smart enough that when the signal comes back, if it's been messed with, it will tell you, it'll give you indications that I'm being jammed. So that's all it is you send the signal out, it manipulates the signal either in range and velocity or whatever, and it sends it back. And the radar was smart enough to go, that is not a return that I'm expecting. Something's messing with me.
Something's
I'm
weird.
being jammed. And it shows you, and it puts strobes up. It gives these lines on the radar, and it does some stuff. So you can immediately, well, it does. It goes full into it. It's being jammed in about every mode you can possibly see because everything comes up and this aspect gets long. It's all kinds of, I don't want to get into details, but you can tell it's being jammed. So, and
As
it's
you
what
said
it
on
does-
Rogan, by the way, that jamming is an act of war.
active
right?
jamming is when you actively jam another platform. Yes, it's technically an act of war.
Feels like you should be freaking out at this point. I mean,
So, well, he does it, and then in the back seat, so they don't have a stick and throttle. They have what their side stick controllers, so they can control all the sensors, and they can just toggle around and do stuff. So he has the ability to just move one switch real quick, and it will go from that azimuth elevation on the radar to the targeting pod. Well, as soon as he commanded the radar to look at that target, the targeting pod goes, oh, what's over there? And it'll stare because it goes down the line of sight because all the systems are hooked together. When he moves that thing to the left and he swaps the displays out and he says, instead of looking at the radar, I want to look at the targeting pod, he sees it on the targeting pod because the targeting pod's already looking there. And now he's on a passive track because he's not literally sending any energy out. He's just receiving IR energy from the Tic Tac.
Yep.
And then the system itself will track the pixels and the contrast differences. It depends on what mode you're in. So it says, oh, and that's where those little bars you see in the video where the bars come up left and right.
doing some vision-based tracking.
That's exactly what it is. So, and then
And that's the video.
he goes through and
Changes zooms, changes the mode.
he goes through all the modes. So there's the narrow, medium, and wide. So wide is far away, medium, and then narrow. And then there's the TV mode, and he goes from IR mode to the TV mode. The cool thing with the TV mode is narrow IR mode is only medium TV mode. So you can actually get closer with narrow TV mode. It's got a better zoom capability when you go into TV mode. So he goes through all those things. And that's when you see it going from a black background to a white background.
He's trying to figure out what the heck is this?
Well, yeah, and he wants to get as much data as he can on it based on the different modes instead of just staring at it going, what is that thing?
Yeah.
Granted, the video has been out. It actually was on YouTube for years.
And
Before the government released it.
it was leaked 2007?
I got the guy that was in my back seat sent me an email and I had retired. So this is because I was working down in San Diego. So this is about 2008, early 2009. He sends me a link to strangeland.com, which is not suitable for work. Oh yeah, it's top notch.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, I can remember the email. Hey, Skip, does this look familiar? And I look at it, I'm like, how the hell did that get on strangeland.com? So next thing you know, it ends up on YouTube.
So, having heard that, which I think is pretty gripping, pretty interesting, there are three types of skeptical reactions to this. The people who are into it are already into it, so I'm not going to really cover that. But there are three types of skeptical reactions. Number one, people who say, basically, I don't care. It's not important to me. You know what? We're not going to reach those people. Fine. That's one skeptical reaction. The second skeptical reaction is the media. And I just want to play a quick little clip of CNN so that you can get a taste of what they do. I know most of you probably already know this, but let's just get an actual clip in here so that I can rip them apart afterwards.
Commander David Fravor still can't explain what he says he saw that day. November 2004, the Navy fighter pilot was on a training mission west of San Diego when he was ordered to check out something in the water not far away. On a clear day, over a smooth ocean, he saw the object, waves breaking over it, and says he saw something hovering above it.
It's randomly moving north, south, east, west, just random, just stopping, going the other direction, like you could do with a helicopter, but a little bit more abrupt. It looks like a 40-foot-long Tic Tac with no wings.
Fravor says he and his four-man team tracked the object for several minutes until it just disappeared. Tonight, CNN has learned the Pentagon had a secretive program to research UFOs like the one Fravor spotted. The project was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, run by an official named Luis Elizondo.
I think this is a national security imperative. We have clear things that we do not understand how they work, operating in areas that we can't control.
A defense official tells CNN the program cost at least $22 million over 5 years before it was shut down in 2012. According to the New York Times and Politico, which first reported this story, Tens of millions of dollars for the project were pushed through by former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Those publications say a lot of the money for the Pentagon UFO program went to a company called Bigelow Aerospace, run by a longtime friend of Reid's, Robert Bigelow, a big believer in UFOs. Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reid and his political action committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture. It doesn't look good for anybody. It's hard to imagine that something that came about that way and profited somebody who pushed for the program was a good use of taxpayer money.
So I stopped that clip halfway through because we don't need to hear that propaganda and bullshit for too long. You see what they do there is they talk about the story, David Fravor. They quickly move to the government program, the UFO program, which is still related and interesting. And then they move to Harry Reid and corrupt politicians doing things. And then they move to some analyst who's an asshole trying to convince you that it doesn't matter, saying like, well, taxpayer money shouldn't be spent on looking for little green men or whatever it is. So did you see the maneuver there? Fravor to UF program to politicians to taxpayer money, and boom, you're off of it. You know, it's like the Seinfeld joke where he says, I just try to distract people by saying things like, I didn't pick up your dry cleaning. I just came back from buying a speedboat. And then Elaine says, you bought a speedboat? And he goes, nope, but see what I did there? I just shifted you off it. That's what they do. All right, fuck those people, okay? That they don't matter, but I just want to give you a clip of that because I say they don't matter. What I mean is they don't matter to me. What they say does matter to the general public because they make it a comedy or a circus. You know, they downplay it. I don't know why. I'm not sure why they're not interested in it, but they're not, and you have to be careful of those dark witches out there, the dark magic that exists. So now let's go to the third and final skeptical reaction to this type of story. And this one I try to give with a little bit more thoughtfulness and respect. And I'm just going to play a clip for you now of Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about what he needs to believe in UFOs or aliens. And it's from The Big Think. It's about 6 or 7 minutes long.
There are many people who see things in the sky and are sure, they can't explain it, so they're sure it's aliens visiting. Well, if you were really, really sure of that, you are not likely to write me a letter. Unless you're writing me a letter to convince me of your point of view. But that doesn't make for a fertile exchange. If you see lights in the sky and you don't know what they are and you want further insight on what they could be and write me a letter, that's a meaningful exchange. If you can't explain what it is, and it's flying and it's an object, it's an unidentified flying object, period. You just said you don't know what it is. So that sentence should not continue beyond that phrase. You can't say, I don't know what it is, therefore it must be aliens visiting from another planet. If you don't know what it is, it therefore must not be anything. Okay. So maybe we are getting visited by aliens daily. In all of these sightings, it's aliens. I don't have a problem with that. My issue is what you are presenting as evidence in support of that claim. If it's entirely grounded in your eyewitness testimony, you need to know that eyewitness testimony on the totem of weight of evidence, it is at the bottom. A little scary because in the court of law, it's considered pretty high evidence. People say, I need a witness. No, you want data. That's what you really want. You want information that didn't have to pass through someone's sensory system so that you can minimize bias, delusion, the filtering that we always do as the world outside of us comes through our senses for us to then decide what it is and what is not going on around us. It's why we invented science, so that we wouldn't have to depend on our senses as the ultimate measure of what is or is not true in the world. Science and its methods and tools. The telescope, the microscope, the recorders, chart recorders, all of this. So, the best thing is, and by the way, I don't care what your pedigree is, I don't care if you're a military colonel, pilot, Air Force. Are you human? That's all that matters. After that, give me better evidence. And yes, Carl Sagan's famous dictum, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So, best thing, just drag the alien into town square. And you'll be rich and famous overnight. You don't have to argue with me. I'm not stopping you. Go ahead. But you know what's more significant than that fact? Is that today, worldwide, we are uploading to the internet 1 billion photographs a day. Everyone has a camera and a video camera. Remember all those reports of people getting abducted and poking their gonads? Where's the video of that today? You can film that and stream it to the internet while it's happening, in case they snatch it from you. Because these are aliens that don't want a record of this, of course. Where's all the video? Where are the images of you posing for selfies with the aliens? I don't see that. That would be very helpful starter evidence that your experience was real. And don't require that I have to depend on your eyewitness testimony to decide what is or is not true in this world. You know what would make good data? You're in the flying saucer, whatever it is they came here in. Tell the alien, look over there. And then while they look away, snatch something off the shelf, like an ashtray or something. I don't know if the aliens smoke. Something. Anything off an alien spaceship is going to be interesting. Anything. I promise. And then you got something to bring to the lab if you can't drag the alien itself. Then we can talk. Until then, spend more time getting better evidence than trying to convince people that they exist in the absence of it.
So here's some of the problem that I have with what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. The first thing is that there's kind of a general sense that as much as I love science and scientists, that they kind of view themselves as knowledge itself, which is really irritating. And I think it's a problem for them, especially when they don't really know what the universe is about. Don't believe me? Let me read you a couple of clips of Neil deGrasse Tyson saying that very thing. Quote, this is in 2018 to Jolene Creighton of Futurism.com. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Quote, we don't understand the most fundamental aspects of our universe. What? How about another quote? We still don't know how we go from organic molecules to self-replicating life. That is basically the origin of life as we know it. So we don't understand how the origin of life on Earth. What exactly would you do? Would scientists do with evidence from another planet then? If we don't understand our own life? How does that work? What would you use it as? A coffee table? A footstool? What would you do with that evidence, Neil? And I'm trying to be respectful here because I respect Neil deGrasse Tyson. I love him. I think he's great. I listen to his podcast. Big fan. But I think you need to walk it back a little bit. Want another quote? Here goes. This is referring to the fact that we understand less than 5% of the universe, and the parts that we don't understand we label as dark matter and dark energy. And this is what Neil deGrasse Tyson said about those terms. Quote, those terms make it sound like we know something. We don't. End quote. That's Neil deGrasse Tyson. So here's the problem. When you say things like this, and in your dismissive or at least siding with, it seems like, CNN, for example, you're saying to people that it's not really happening. Do you know how many times 10 billion UFO sightings have to be correct for everything that we know to change? 1. That's how many. 1. So I think just because they didn't capture the Tic Tac craft and bring it to Neil deGrasse Tyson and show him and say, touch this and do this and poke that and prod that, and you want to put him in the same category as someone who took acid and went to the desert and claims that they got their gonads poked, as you put it. Those are not the same sightings and stories. We're talking about a commander in the U.S. Navy who's an 18-year pilot. And you want to put him in the gonad category? I think it's a little disingenuous, and I think it's not serious. And I understand what you're saying, that science is data-based. We have to have evidence. I get that. I understand that. But just because they didn't capture the Tic Tac craft doesn't mean that 4 trained eyes didn't see it, didn't engage with it for 5 minutes. We have video of it. And by the way, if you remember in the clip, he was saying that for weeks these things had been coming down before this Tic Tac sighting and video. They were saying for weeks these things had been coming down from 80,000 feet, which is space basically, coming down to 10,000 feet, unaffected by weather, hovering, and then going back up, and then coming back down and going back up. Are they lying? Maybe they are. Maybe the whole government is in on this, and they've got David Fravor out telling stories and telling tall tales to distract us from the budget or whatever is going on. I don't know. You tell me. So, in light of the skeptic view, I've got another clip for you, which is Joe Rogan talking to David Fravor when he came on his podcast last year. Kick it.
It's way more fascinating when someone like you talks about it versus some fucking random kook. You know, that's what makes me incredibly interested, is just your credibility and the fact that this is not, you don't have a history of seeing wacky shit that other people don't see.
No, just this once.
But it's on video, and that there's other ones as well. It's really strange. And I've seen people try to explain it away. And what I don't like about when they explain it away or attempt to explain it away is that they're trying really hard. They're not going, who knows what this fucking thing is? They're not looking at it like cleanly. They're looking at it like a quote-unquote skeptic. I don't like the idea of being a skeptic. Not that I don't think you should be skeptical of certain things. I certainly think you should be. But there's a lot of people that brand themselves as skeptics. And I think it's a lazy way to look at things. I really do. Because I think you're just looking for the holes in things without looking at it objectively. If you wanted to be a scientist, if you wanted to be someone who is a fan of science, then you have to look at it as a thing. Like, look at this information and let's study this without any bias, any preconceived notions. I don't think they're doing that. They're looking at it and they're trying to find a way where they can justify that it's fake. And they're just doing all sorts of mental gymnastics to try to make it fake. That video that you show where that thing slips off to the left and takes off at incredible rates of speed, that alone should freak people the fuck out.
Yeah, well, I think because people confuse all the time, like we took the video. No, it was another crew that took the video. We watched it for 5 minutes with our eyeballs, and there was 4 of us. And we all have the same story. We all saw the same stuff. We all came back and looked at each other and scratched our head and said, WTF, serious? What was that? And then what do? You move on. We never saw it again. I imagine they probably saw him on radar after that, but I think
they're probably seeing him on radar all the time. They just don't bring it to the attention of the general public.
Oh, yeah, because if you don't, for a ship, when they see something and, you go, what is that? Well, you don't have any way to go out there and look at it.
Like when you're talking about how they were informing you that they were seeing these things previous to your mission, when you're doing this exercise and they let you know that they're seeing these things, did you say, hey, how frequent is this? Is this something that happens all the time?
I didn't get into that. Ours was more of the moment of, when he's telling us, hey, for the last 2 weeks we've been tracking these things.
Right.
And we don't know what they are.
But you don't know whether or not it was just those 2 weeks, or maybe it was a year ago. There was other similar situations, or
there's other situations that have happened out there. But I would say, for this, I don't even know. One, you got to take it serious. Yeah. We have a tendency, if we don't know what it is, if we just ignore it, it'll go away. And I joke, there was an incident years. It's probably not too far off the same time frame, where I think it was like the Constellation was doing her workups before she got decommissioned. And a Soviet Oscar-class submarine surfaced behind her, right? And then it's like, go to battle stations, World War III. How did this foreign submarine get in our area and has been monitoring our workups? That's a big deal.
Right.
I said, but now we go out and we have these things that are coming at will, and there's nothing we can do about it. We don't know what they are. We have confirmed sighting by 2 aircrew, 4 of us, 2 planes, that said, look, this is not an airplane. This is not a weather balloon. This is not a blip. It has performance well beyond, and the airplanes that we were flying at the time were literally brand new Super Hornets right out of the Boeing factory. I mean, these were brand new, first Block 2 series that came out. And you go, why wasn't something done? It's like, we don't know what it is. I think it's good now, the moves that have happened over the last, 2 years since the original article came out that, now there's a new reporting for the pilots. The Navy's acknowledged, hey, these things, we don't know what they were. They're starting to take it serious because, I know there are other events that are not out, recent events where people have been called in to go, hey, I've seen this thing. So the investigation process is still going on. We don't stop. The military doesn't stop. Even if you take funding away, we don't stop. We don't stop until we're told to stop. So, what's going on? You go, well, ATIP ended. They spent $4.5 million a year on it. I think it was $22 million over the 5 years. So you go, what are they doing since then? Well, I'm pretty sure there's still people looking at this, and there's still people that are taking this serious. I will tell you that I won't get into specifics, but there are people inside the United States government that are taking this serious. And I've been down to D.C. twice to talk to folks, behind closed doors to go because they want to hear the story. And I've got a lot of, you got to be joking. I mean, this seriously happened, and I'm like, yeah, it did happen, and it is real. What are you doing about it?
So, what kind of people are you talking to?
High-level government officials is what I'll say. And most of that is because that conversation is between me and them, and I don't want people speculating, but you can say high-level government officials I have talked to.
Well, that was always the speculation about, what would someone do if they became president? Well, the first thing I would do is I would tell everybody about the UFOs. I would ask immediately what's going on. And I always thought about it. I said, how many people actually know what's going on? And how much of the information? I mean, it's not like if they're dealing with something like this, like your experience, it seems like what you described is what is known. So it's this anomalous event where this thing defies our current understanding of technology, and then it's gone.
Yes.
And so what do you have? You don't have anything else other than that. Like, what other information does anybody have?
Well, I would say this because I've talked to Bob. We did
Bob Lazar.
Yeah, we did an event together, and I'll leave it to everyone it's up to you to believe Bob. I'll say this: Bob's a normal guy. Bob's not crazy.
He's not crazy at all.
Not at all.
That was the weirdest thing about talking to him.
But when you look at it and go, because I had asked Bob, I said what he describes in the technology when he talks about his story. I said, well, do you honestly think we could reverse engineer it? I said, how long do you think it would take us? And his response to me was another 100 years. He goes, Dave, it was so far beyond. He goes, the stuff that he says he worked on. He's like, he was on your podcast because I watched it. Hey, there was no wires, and because I had asked him when he said you first described the ship that he got to see, he said, I used to say, they built it and then it was like wax and you'd heat it up. He goes, now I would say it was built with 3D printing because now with 3D printing we can build things literally from the ground up, and it's basically built as one, not panels, no rivets. It's just made.
Right.
And so when you talk about that and you go, well, it's still another 100 years. So you go, well, what if you had the technology? We still, if what Bob says is correct, we still don't understand it. And how fast would it take us to understand that? I mean, if it's driven by something that we don't even have on Earth, which is when he talks about that element, we can't create it. We can create it for a microsecond, and then it decays, and we go,
element
okay,
115.
Yeah. So, I think we're still a long ways off. I'll argue with the people that go, are we really alone? I was telling Jeremy we used to go out on goggles. Out in the middle of the Pacific, there's no light pollution.
Goggles?
Night vision goggles, so we can see. Well, you go out at night, I'd be on like a tanker hop or something, just hanging out, not doing anything, driving around in circles with the autopilot on. You just turn all the lights down in the cockpit so you have no light pollution, and you just roll your head back and look up. there's billions and billions and billions of stars out there. And, I always look up because I'm like, are we alone? And I look up and go, well, if we're the only ones around, everything I'm looking at, it's a pretty sad place. It's a pretty lonely universe. I asked my astrophysics prof that once. I said, you believe in extraterrestrial life? And she's like, of course not. And I said, well, there's billions and billions of planets. You think we're it? I mean, just the probability of it is you'd go, oh, there's probably something else out there. And I'm not crazy. I'm just opening up the possibility that we are not the only planet that has life on it.
I think people don't like to seem silly. They don't like to be foolish. And I think when people start talking about anything that's not proven or anything that's connected to a bunch of loony people that are making up stories, which UFOs certainly are.
Yes.
UFOs are connected to so many people that have made up so many stories. What was that gentleman's name from, you would know that guy. He was from another country, Billy something or another.
Oh, Billy Meyer.
Billy Meyer.
Myers, yeah.
Seems 100% full of shit.
Yeah,
correct?
he's proven to have done tons of hoaxes with this, but here's the deal. Sometimes I think people have a real experience, and they're always like chasing that dragon, and they get UFO disease, and their brain goes fucking berserk, right? I know that there are people that have had profound experiences, and then they can't ever replicate them, so then they just start going crazy. And I don't blame them for it. But you got someone like Commander Fravor, when he saw that AAV, anomalous aerospace vehicle, his reaction was, I want to fly it. That's a pretty cool reaction. I'd like to fly it.
Yeah, imagine flying that thing.
Why would we assume that aliens are talking to humans? Isn't it possible they could talk to birds or whales? How do we know they couldn't communicate? We know whales talk to each other. We know birds talk to each other. How do you know that aliens wouldn't come here and go, humans aren't going to get this, let's talk to the birds? That sounds crazy if at first maybe, because you think that everybody would come to us first, like we must talk to the President of the United States. Maybe they're talking to the President of birds. Remember, if you can give, patreon.com/arthouseradio. I love all of you. This is the second to last episode before the end of 2020, and I will see you on Thursday with a few thoughts on what to look forward to in 2021. Until then, stay safe. I love you. Until next time.